Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. We are on episode number 100.
100, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, I just want to point something out real quick because we are just guys. This whole podcast is pretty loosey-goosey, not much planning, preparation.
Loosey-goosey? Isn't that a girl's name?
I don't know. But it's just we don't really have a budget for this. We don't really think very hard about this.
Is this where you're going to ask everybody for money?
We need people that have more creative juices flowing through them for things like 100th episode. So I do want to point out that I didn't totally disregard any sort of decoration or celebration or acknowledgement of that. So right here, right there, little Post-it note with a little 100th on it, just to what is that?
Celebrate.
You
just commemorate.
Commemorate. That was the word I was looking. Commemorate such a glorious event as our 100th episode. 100.
All right. So anyway, thank you guys for joining us. This is the podcast. If you're new to this, that we are going to chase the truth wherever it runs. And we are a podcast that's based out of Olive Branch Community Church. And I'm Greg Harris, senior pastor here. And you just heard a lot from a guy named Brent and my buddy Steven. How you guys doing today? You ready?
Doing great. Yeah. My name is Steven Oldham. I'm the local outreach coordinator here. And thank you for listening to the podcast. This is our 100th. And so if you are listening for the first time, make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're not watching us on YouTube, let us know what audio you listen to, or if it's Spotify or Apple or iTunes, subscribe, and send in your questions.
Oh, we're only 3 away on YouTube from 800.
I know,
people, right? So
and
3 away from 1,000 downloads on our app or something. There's a bunch of cool we just need help. So
if you have not downloaded the Olive Branch Church and School app, download it now. We want to reach 1,000 on that at least. And just since we went on YouTube for the podcast, we've increased subscriptions by 200 people, I think, but we're still just 3 short of 800. So everybody, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I don't care if you don't even watch it. I don't care if you listen to it on Spotify or Apple and you don't even know what YouTube is. Go to YouTube.
I mean,
find it.
If we
subscribe.
really want to do this, we just go get some bots.
Yeah, some bots. 3 bots. We need 3 bots.
You know what?
How much is 3 bots?
My grandson and my son-in-law have the games play themselves for a long time to build up points
Don't
stuff.
tell people that. You shouldn't be saying that.
Not mine. I don't want to get them kicked out.
Allegedly they do this.
Allegedly, I think they told me people do that. So maybe we can do that with YouTube.
I mean, they don't realize that you're an AI created by ChatGPT anyway. So
there you go. All right, so we have a couple of cool things. One of the things was last episode 99. We asked everybody. We wanted to kind of make this a celebration episode where people are sharing their memories.
But we didn't get out in time.
And sharing questions. And yes, we had some technical difficulties again this week because it's Christmas time and everybody was focused and busy.
By the way, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. And so we understand that it got out a couple of days ago. So really, if our listeners out there were enthusiastic at all about our show, they could have snuck something in, right? But, I don't want to shame you, but if that's the only thing that's going to work, I'm not beyond that. So, but one of the things that we did, because we didn't get any questions, we didn't get any memories, we invited one of our beginning listeners to join us for a few minutes today, and share some of her memories of the podcast. So everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Debbie Redinger.
Yahoo! Welcome.
So we're going to be sharing this mic, so it'll be a little awkward, but go ahead, Debbie.
Awkward.
You are probably one of our number one fans who has started encouraging us when we had 3 listeners, and that was me, Greg, and Steven.
Really? Nobody listened to 00?
I have no idea, but I just know that Debbie was always in the hallways encouraging us and keeping things going. And I believe she was the first one to email us a question, and she has been a trooper. So Debbie.
Well, thank you. And I have some good news for you. I have not liked you on YouTube because I always watch it just on
You don't like us?
Oh, no, she
No,
hasn't
not
subscribed
like
yet.
Subscribed. I haven't subscribed. So if I go home and do that right now, you'll be only need 2 more.
Two
So you
more.
guys
There we go.
Only need 2 more.
By the end of the show.
Yeah.
Two more.
This is
2 more.
2 more. Wait,
Like,
why are we?
I feel like Brick.
Is
I
this
feel
the
like
number?
Brick from the middle. If you've never watched that show, watch that show. It's funny. All right.
It's fine.
So Debbie, what are some of the what is your favorite memory that you have from the podcast, and who is your favorite person?
And who's my favorite person? Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know if it's my favorite memory, but when you were talking about the whole like your nose and your boogers and stuff, I really can't get that out of my head now
Right.
anymore.
Deep theology.
So that's kind of like sunk in there. But
Of all the things that we wanted to stick in there, that was the one.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I just love how you guys talk
It's
about
kind of stuck in there.
Yeah, you
so
gotta-
many.
Peel it off your mind.
Oh my goodness. You just can't really put your finger on it. Right? Okay, well, you can tell why I like this because I like Brent's sense of humor. So even if they don't always get it, I always appreciate it.
Well, we know who her favorite is.
We know why Brent brought you on. No.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes, and even the jokes, the whole St. Nicholas, I repeat your jokes. So,
Do you?
Yes, I do.
And you've even sent us a few jokes that I've used.
Oh,
so
yes, I do
thank you.
enjoy jokes a lot.
So what was your biggest memory of the podcast other than the boogers?
The boogers? Well, I didn't really think, because I didn't know really you were going to ask me that question. So I can't pinpoint a favorite memory. But I will tell you, listening to the three of you just puts me in such a great state of mind. I'm learning something. I'm listening to three guys have fun with each other. And even if I can't sleep at night, if I take an episode I've already listened to and I just put it on for 15 minutes, you guys you're soothing. I love to listen to you, and you guys make me feel good, and off to sleep I go.
So yeah,
We have an ASMR channel coming out soon too.
Yeah, if you guys can't sleep at night, Debbie recommends listening to the Rabbit Trail podcast.
Re-listening to one that you've already listened to. Yes.
I'm just going to start talking like this all the time.
NPR.
You guys will be so
Debbie.
quiet.
Close your eyes. Breathe in.
Count your blessings before you go to sleep.
Oh my goodness. But my favorite thing was the live event. I did get to enjoy, meeting people that I didn't know listen to it. And just watching you guys do your stuff is always super fun.
All right. And what kind of who have we had on here as guests over the last 2 years?
Gina?
We've had Teresa.
Teresa, Gina, Nick.
Justin?
We had Justin on here?
In fact, Gina and Justin, I thought were both on. I don't know if they were on at the same time, but they were on.
I wasn't here for 3 months, so at one point. No, that was last year, but whatever.
Yeah. All right.
So I do love the guests. I would love it when you guys have a guest, just because it just mixes it up a little bit, and I love the female perspective. Yes.
So thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. We really appreciate you.
Yeah.
That you came on.
Oh, okay. All right. And I just want to say, too, Debbie, I was just kind of looking at things again. And when we did the live event, we broke down some of the listeners and who's been the most involved and everything else. And I think you did win that, right?
I did not win that.
No, by one.
No, I did not.
That was like Tiny Tim on A Christmas Carol, and he did not die. So who won that?
I
Is it
did.
Christian or
Lisa, I think.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think it was Lisa. Yeah.
Okay.
But this is the greater victory.
Yeah.
You're here with us.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Now I can
There
say,
you go.
well, you might have won, but
You
I
were-
got to be on the podcast.
And I will
Yes.
say, this moment right now is probably going to be my highlight for this coming year. So,
This is the first one this year.
I-
It's all downhill from this point on.
I know,
huh?
I know it is. But yeah, I just want to say you were number 2 again. Just since the live podcast, who has sent in the most questions? But you have had a busy year, so So yeah, we'll give you some slack on that.
Thank you very much.
But Sylvia
Thank you very
was
much.
number one in
Sylvia
sending
won.
us.
Okay.
She sent us the most questions. So kudos to you, Sylvia. Keep sending them in. But yeah, obviously, I think two of the most encouraging ones is Debbie and James. So I just want to shout out to some of the listeners out there that are, at least for me, the most encouraging ones that are always giving me feedback, and not personal feedback about the podcast. James and Debbie seem to talk about it the most and talk it up the most. And our newest, the one that I just discovered, is Jennifer Leos. I met her, and she's been telling me she's been listening to it and actually got a shirt today. So, boom, chakalaka.
A lot of us do it for the shirt.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like
we
that
do
shirt.
enjoy that shirt.
I like that shirt a lot.
It's a good
I
one.
do too. So, all right. Anything you want to say before you leave?
Well, I hope you continue doing this podcast. I hope it doesn't get into like the 2-hour, mark. So I've noticed that you guys go up a lot. So it just takes me longer to listen. That's the only reason why it's a little harder when they're longer.
Yes.
So I don't have as much free time as I used to. So.
All right. Yes, we will try to get back down to a reasonable hour. We just we just like to talk,
No,
and,
you don't.
when I say we, I mean they. So
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
And so yeah, we were just talking, and we started out at like 45 minutes, and now we're up to like an hour and a half, right?
I get complaints the other way. I was like, wow, I wish it was longer. So, yeah, you should write in and let us know. What do you think is the right length for you? That'd be good to know.
So then we're gonna make edited versions for everybody, like personalized version for that'd be hard.
Well, on Facebook, for those of you that like it shorter, we do have shorts. They're only about 30 seconds.
That's
a
not on
minute and a half?
Facebook. I don't know how old you are, but
Facebook.
It's
wow.
it's on
No, it's
YouTube.
not.
YouTube
It's YouTube.
shorts.
Yes.
YouTube
Yeah.
shorts.
Yep.
On MySpace as well.
Yeah.
MySpace, yes.
And on your shorts.
Yes. AOL, Instant Messenger. Make sure you post those videos.
When you
So-
dial up, let us know.
All right, Debbie. Well,
my
thank you for
goodness.
stopping by and saying hi.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for
It
having
makes
me.
it
I
worth-
really appreciate it. And you guys keep up the good work. And I'm here to encourage you to do God's work.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Debbie Redinger. Yay.
Yeah.
And if you would like to be a guest on this podcast, please let us know. Send us $100 and subscribe to YouTube. There you go.
Are you? Yeah. I'm really.
And
sad.
when I say us $100, I mean
means
me.
him.
Yeah. I'm really sad that you said that this is the top moment for the year because I was working on getting Ben Roethlisberger in here for this, so
Ooh.
it won't be that great.
You know what?
If he
I'm
was
just
here, this would probably still be my favorite one.
You know what? I know Debbie better, so it
Yeah,
might.
I just like I always want to do like that challenge. We should do one where it's like, hey, if everybody's 6 degrees separated from Kevin Bacon and obviously Ben Roethlisberger too. So like, if you know somebody who might know somebody, see if you can't get this podcast of Brent over there to him to see if he'll actually listen to it because Brent would be ecstatic.
And I just want to say, Ben Roethlisberger does have a podcast. It's called Footballin' with a AHL because he's a Pittsburgh boy. I listen to his podcast. I watch his podcast. And I just want to say, Ben, I hope you reciprocate. I hope you're watching ours. I hope you have subscribed to ours as well. And number one, I'll throw it out there right now. We would love to have you on this. And if you want to come and be part of our podcast, we would do that. And I would reciprocate, and I would be a guest on yours as well. Don't get too excited. But yes, that's out there. It's out there now. I can't take it back.
All right, can't wait to see what happens with that one.
Yeah.
This is probably the weirdest beginning we've ever
It
done.
is the strangest
I don't know.
beginning.
Scabs was pretty weird.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Which one?
The Scabs was pretty
Yeah,
weird.
why do we keep bringing that up?
I know. Let it die. Let it die. We
Let-
just keep
let-
picking at it.
Let it heal.
I know. So most memorable events. So what have some of your guys' most memorable events?
For me, it's the live. I like having the audience to talk to after, just engage with people. So when we recorded the live event, that was my favorite.
Yeah, I've had a couple fun ones. Like I totally loved the live event. That was a blast. I loved our first attempts at doing the YouTube stuff in here. That was kind of different and like whoa, this is weird. And we all felt really awkward at first. We're like, there's cameras on us, and we're like,
you can't come in your pajamas anymore.
Yeah. And it was a little bit more formalized. I think we're loosening up now, but we'll see. And then I don't know. The other one, I enjoy like when we do have guests on. Like I like having my wife on. I love hearing her perspective. She's a super interesting thinker, and so I like hearing where she goes with things, and I like what she draws out of me. I get a little less heady and a little bit more down to earth, and I like that. I like when I'm not a uber brain or something, whatever. So
you heard it. Greg likes his wife.
Yes. I was thinking the whole time. We mentioned two other things. And I'm thinking, okay, marriage therapy here. Don't forget your wife. I was going to make a note, bring her in on this. You don't want to go home and go, I'm not one of your favorite things on the podcast. So good for you. Good. What a good husband.
Thanks.
Yes. What a good husband. And I would say for me too, probably my most memorable event, my funnest event was definitely the live event. So obviously, since it's all of our favorites, we were definitely going to have to do that again.
I was wondering when you were going to bring that up.
Yes, we'll have to do that again. So we'll have to start planning for that, start getting that planned, and probably this summer at some point, knocking one out.
I just hear everybody yelling, get to the theology. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe they're not.
Depends.
So, all right, I thought it would be really, really fun to kind of that 100th thing, kind of reflecting back, to what was popular or whatever when we started the podcast.
COVID.
COVID was coming off of COVID, I think, right?
It was 2020.
Oh, but then with the
beginning of 2022.
But just to compare, the price of gas when we started this was $4.47 a gallon. I mean, if that doesn't just whoa.
It's $4.47 right now.
I know, not much has really changed, but it sounded like a really good segment to do. Just kind of like 2 years ago. Cards you get,
Well, I'll tell you what. 2 years ago, Stephen wasn't with us.
Oh, that's right.
That was a very different time.
And
then sometimes you weren't with me, and then I've been gone more than both of you.
Wow. Yeah. So it was started out with me and you. And then I went on vacation or something, and Stephen filled in, and then
he never left.
And then we came back, and I think you came in a couple of episodes after your first one. So, and
I don't remember.
Well, I think we almost did the entire book of Exodus. I think we just missed like a very beginning portion.
We started out at the beginning of the Champions.
Yeah, so it was really
the Exodus series.
And how deep into Exodus was I was looking at. I kind of looked really quickly to see where we were in Exodus. And I couldn't really pinpoint really quickly without going too far into it.
Yeah, so, I'm not 100% sure, but I could find out.
But it wasn't the beginning of Exodus, right? So we've been in Exodus more than 2 years.
We finished it too.
Yes, we just did. All right. So I just want to throw this out there. I mentioned it earlier, and so I'm going to mention it again, and then we'll really get on with the podcast. But one of the things we would love for you guys to do, and now you have time because we got it out, is to let us know some of your favorite moments. Let us know things that you've enjoyed about the show, things that you would like to see us do, maybe trying something new this year, and whether or not you would like another live event. So let us know, and we would love to hear from you directly. Okay? So
just to answer your question, since I like to answer questions, we started in Exodus chapter 5, went through the whole thing, hit a whole bunch of series in the middle, and after that we've really just done 1 Peter. So those have been the two main books we've kind of looked at. But
we talked a lot about when Hamas, the whole situation with Hamas and Israel came up, a lot of revelation questions we've noticed that we've covered off a lot of them. So I know we spent a fair amount of time discussing those.
All right. So getting into our service this week was really just a worship service.
Yeah, I left everything.
Not just a worship service, but
on the floor.
It was a worship service. A lot of worship music,
worship and celebration, and
prayer, communion. Offering. It was a full worship service. So you had mentioned that you wanted to maybe talk about worship a little bit, and so what's your take?
what's my take on worship? You should do it. It's good for you.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
It's so good. No, I mean, we were talking about just different theories and different thoughts on worship, and just we had a conversation prior to this because we're approaching the new year and just kind of trying to figure out what spiritual disciplines you think you want to add to your life. And one of those is worship, right, for some people. And just why do some men in the men's group resist worshiping? And I do think for some men, it almost feels, I don't know, not manly to like raise your hands, or I don't know if it's a submission thing, but try to express the emotions when they come out. And I think for some people, they feel it's kind of, worship can be almost romanticized for some people. But just trying to challenge people that when you have those emotions it's okay when you're hearing the song and you know that it's true, to release those expressions of faith to God, because I think it does something to your soul to be able to give back to God, let him know how you feel. And sometimes all you have is your thankfulness and your gratitude. And that isn't less manly. To me, it isn't. But I do know why some people resist it, because it feels like romantic in some of the language. One guy said, I was listening to, I don't know who it was, he said, if you just replace the word babe with God, it would sound like every song was almost a love song to him. And so he struggled with worship because it felt like he was listening to the radio, and all the songs are similar to the love songs that we play in our culture. And so that's why I do think a variety of different songs is helpful in a worship venue, so that you have that. And so one of my favorite worship moments was when we were doing Christmas and we were doing the rock song, and you're singing this song. It's like, it's strong. And I do think there are moments like, when people were doing old bar tunes and just like celebrating the camaraderie of the group that were turned into worship songs.
So
those are different feelings and emotions.
I have a couple of thoughts on that, because for me, first of all, I think what's interesting is that, when it comes to that thing about, hey, inserting babe and it's all the same, I've heard that argument before.
Have you?
And Thaddeus Williams flips it on his head. He's a theologian at Biola University. He's actually graduated with me. I love the guy. He's a really, really smart dude. But he wrote an entire article on what does that say about your affections? Like, if our affections are truly so we shouldn't have affections toward God. Like, what's going on here is that we're idolatry. Should we just let an idolatry of women surpass the idea of worshiping God? And it's just kind of this challenge that for me was like, because he was really kind of challenging this hymns only kind of mentality that can get out there. And for me, it's the second part that we have to challenge ourselves with is, what are you saying about men? I know lots of men right there that you just called not men. Because, like, in a sense that I'm not accusing, I just feel like, hey, I'm pretty artistic. I like artsy stuff. I like writing music. I like doing those things. I've got artistic sons. I've got sons who don't like art stuff. And it's like, it's not healthy to not be engaged with our emotions. I've actually had to work through that personally, over the last year. It's been a long journey of trying to rediscover my emotions. And oftentimes men struggle because we're told these kind of falsehoods.
Right.
Like, that's effeminate. No, it's not. It is absolutely not. In fact, David then is effeminate, and I think he was a pretty strong dude. You'd have to say that Asaph was effeminate. The people who end up writing, the prophets themselves wrote poetry more than they even wrote like prose. And there's just an assumption there that the emotional side of life is somehow
only effeminate.
Yeah, and that's actually not true. In fact, women are not primarily emotional. That's actually not a thing. That's a lie of our culture, and it's tough to kind of dig into that. And I think one of the best things to do is get a good discipleship of what masculinity and femininity are from the scriptures, and you'll learn real quick that John Wayne and our diet from American television and stuff like that has trained us oftentimes more in rugged individualism, what a man is, these kind of things, than say what Scripture would identify. And I think we've realized where singing and music came from in the church was actually from a very manly man named Martin Luther. I mean, he brought it back into the church because he believed it was like so critical to the heart of the human being versus just the head. And that's a pretty big thing for a guy who is pretty passionate, I think. So anyway, that was a couple thoughts there.
One of the things, like we're talking about this masculine femininity thing, I think a lot of people, and sometimes men who would be considered rugged men, think that being manly, being masculine means that you
show
you're-
no emotion.
You are, what's the word when you don't
Stoic.
express your stoic? Yeah, you're stoic. You don't really communicate and share your feelings. You don't, you're bold and you're courageous and you'll fight any battle, and and when you're hurt, you just suck it up and move forward, right? And we think, that women want men who can be open and communicate and express themselves well. And I'm telling you, just this holiday season, right? Hallmark movies, and the other channel that plays similar to Hallmark movies. I'm thinking that's not what women want, because every time I watch those shows, right, those guys don't communicate, because there's always this tension that all it would take is a question, or an answer. I saw you with somebody. Do you like them? I thought we had some. No, they ignore the whole thing. They don't communicate. It causes more tension. They're not bold and courageous. They just shiver and pout and run away. And I'm thinking, these are the men that women are drawn to, because Hallmark movies are like crazy popular. So
much so you watch them.
You know what? I'm telling you, I do. I do now. It really is just the same story over and over and over again. But yeah, my wife watches them all the time, and then I get sucked into them, and I have learned to appreciate them more. But it is just ironic that, women say they want men who express themselves, who communicate well, but they love these movies where men don't do that. And they're sissies and pout and run away.
Well, I do think that we live in a culture that's really kind of muddled the water and confused what it means to be a man in many ways. And so there is men in the church trying to push back against a strong feminization. And I would say that there is a lot of worship services songs where it does feel like this song is not about theology. It's about just someone's kind of odd phraseology. It does sound like a romance song. And to that, it's hard to counteract the culture's view that romance is the most important things, because they link in our culture romance and sexuality, if you have that link, it will make every kind of affection seem romantic when it's not necessarily. So I think men probably should, especially if you're in the church, get used to expressing their emotions and feelings and stop equating them to always having sexual ideas. And I think that's what our culture has done bad for men is I can say I love my mother. I can say I love the Lord. I can say I have affection for, some people put more affection towards their dog than they do for expressing how much they care about God. And to me, it's just one of those things where I think someone's been told if you do that, it's weak, or it's somehow less human or something, or less manly. And I don't agree with that. But I do agree that you do have to, as a man, fight through the idea to stop sexualizing every romantic notion that you have, or romanticizing every notion as a sexual thing, and start thinking of it as just an expression of life, that it is okay to have emotions. It's okay to be grateful. It's okay to tell somebody something nice about themselves. And it's a struggle, I think, for some people, because they see the culture, and all the men in our culture are being praised for almost being effeminate, in the sense that they should never be manly. They should, in their eyes, however you define that, you should never be aggressive. You should never be a protector. You should always be second class. Men are the cause of all the problems in the culture. And because of that, you should be quiet and just sit there, and so some men get kind of, difficult. They don't express themselves very well. And then you come to the church, and there almost seems like a counterculture. You're going too hard in the opposite direction. You don't express emotions. You don't know how to say, to have a moment on your knees before the Lord, crying, or in a church service, getting on your knees or raising your hands. But that's a good thing to do, and it's not a sexual thing. So I don't know why that happens to men. I just think we keep sexualizing children so much that now everyday affection for people has been dead. And so I think we have to re-energize our gratitude for the Lord and what he's done for us, and let those emotions come out. So,
I think that comes from a very, I don't know what you guys think, but there's a lot of language that we use where it's very, we've gotten love focused, so much. So not that that's bad. The Bible, talks about God as love, but it also speaks of his.
And without love, we're nothing.
Right. But it also, but what's weird is there's entire New Testament books that doesn't even bring the word up. It's, that it's not so core that it can be literally not used. It is core. So don't get me wrong. It's just that there are so many other attributes of God that you can go into, like the goodness of God. Like I'm just looking at last week's set list, and only one of them was really anywhere near kind of that like kind of.
No, I enjoy our worship services.
Love you, kind of love you, like, but songs like Gratitude, which are very simple. They're simple songs. Like when I think about the philosophy of we should probably have Matt come in and join us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because the philosophy of worship songs to me, these are prayers. These are, and sometimes you're praying your theology, and sometimes you're praying something. Yeah, it's sentimental, but that sentimentality is appropriate for some kind of mood. I think the best are sentimentally theologically correct.
Yeah.
But obviously we try not to sing things that are theologically incorrect. But I do think that there is a sense that people go like, well, I'm bowing in my heart, that kind of stuff, where I've heard this a lot. Like when you came from like the Pentecostal sphere. I came from like a normal non-denominational, and I've been in years invested into like the Southern Baptist world, and there is a strong strain in the Southern Baptist world. Like
very stoic, very
well,
kind of.
Yeah, there's like half it that's super stoic, and then you have the other half that's like Southern, just like woo, it's kind of like exciting, and it's usually the Northern Baptists who are a little like so, but it's kind of funny. Why the long face? The
when you said Northern Baptist, you heretic! That joke is so funny.
Emo Phillips joke.
Yes. Yeah. We've referenced it twice, but this idea, like Gratitude, that song, people didn't hear it, but Steve said that this is like a testimony for him, and I think it's really cool because what he was talking about is in these lyrics. Were this idea that all my words fall short, I got nothing new, how could I express all my gratitude? I could sing these songs as often do, but every song must end and you never do, so I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, because all I have is a hallelujah. And so it's a very simple song, and what Steve was getting to, I think, was this idea in the bridge where it's like, come on, my soul, don't you get shy on me, lift up your song, because you've got a lion inside of those lungs, get up and praise the Lord.
Yeah.
So
Don't be cowardice. Yeah, express it.
Reminiscent of the Psalms of wake my soul, wake up, stop being so
don't sleep
down, and I know Steve for years was hiding in a sense his expression of his worship. He's been a greeter for years and years and years, and now he got up and started singing. I think for him, this was an expression as it hit in his life of like I was like letting my soul be quiet, but there was something God wanted to do through me in the music, and I think and you're
talking about Steve, the guy who sang the song this last week. Yeah, he sang it
this last week, and I just appreciated that because again, for me, knowing him, knowing his story, gave a lot of great context to that. But I think that this is the part that, like, I think people either there's I don't know if there's a need to disassociate from music, because you're afraid of being swept away by it because it's so powerful. That's like, this almost like I got to have control.
Well, there's two extremes, right? Never having control and doing all kinds of crazy things, right, and then never expressing anything and never releasing the gratitude that you feel.
And I've experienced kind of both. Like when it's a new song, I don't really get into it. It's probably like the second time we sing it, and usually for the second time we sing it is after rehearsal, because by the time first service rolls around, I've heard it once and I'm like, okay, I've had a chance to think through it. But a lot of people, they hear a song once, and then it's sometimes weeks to months later that they hear it again. And so maybe unless they're listening to Christian radio that's doing those songs, sometimes it takes a little while for a song to get integrated into the soul. And I would express that most people are hit by the songs they came to the Lord around. You remember we used to talk about that in youth ministry, where it's like, man,
you think the deepest songs are the ones when you came to the Lord or when you first started going to church?
Yeah, you typically...
Those are the ones that resonate with you the most?
Oh, they do. They typically resonate. And I actually think the reason why they resonate so much is you were most committed typically at that time.
I think it's when your affections were most stirred that, it's kind of like you get in a relationship, you kind of have to continue to think about, I remember how much I care about this person, and let those emotions come back. But if you don't, it's kind of like you take it for granted.
But it helps me remember that when you're setting up stuff, like there's entire generations of men and women who grew up with these hymns, who grew up with older songs from the Calvary Chapel time period with Maranatha and stuff like that. And sometimes just busting out one of those songs is incredible. People just fall apart crying because it hits that affection. And somewhere back there, they something closed down or something happened and in their worship that it just didn't it didn't resonate anymore. And I don't know what that is. I don't know when that happens, because that hasn't happened for me. I love worship music.
Yeah, I know you're a worship guy.
But I've watched it happen. And so it's like, I just want to encourage you, like, if that has happened, go back to the old songs, reawaken some of that affection. It's okay. Those songs are out there. They're all over the internet. You can find them everywhere. And
yeah, but there is a different experience of listening to them and participating with the congregation in them as well.
I have both experiences. I do think, like, it was really weird this week. I was coming down the hill, and I don't remember when I first heard the song Gratitude, but I was coming down the hill and I just heard a second of it. And so I found the song, and then I played it twice, and something hit me very strongly. And so I started praying on the way down, and then we get to church, and that's the song that we're singing. And so to me, it was like, okay, today is a day to be grateful and to let the emotion of the Lord, what he did for me, how he loves me, let that carry me into today and not withhold it, because that'll lift your day up. If you keep holding back on that, your day will be stifled, your emotions will be stifled, and you won't let the Lord heal things that need to come up. And I would say do it. There's a hesitation to let those emotions go because you think you're not going to be in control. Well, you have to practice anything. It's like anything in life. When you first find a person that you care about, or you first feel like, I need to tell I haven't called my family in a while, it's their birthday, I've got to tell them how much they mean to me. It's what we're supposed to do if we care about someone, but also you want it to be sincere. That sometimes takes practice. It sometimes takes just making it wrong, getting it wrong. But if you never do it, you hold on your emotions. I think it damages you in some ways.
Yeah, stuffing your emotions is not a form of control.
In fact,
but I mean, it's almost virtue. We turned it into a virtue. Like, I don't want to be like them because I'll be rolling on the floor and barking. And I'm like, that's another extreme. Don't go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah. In fact, remember that when you think about like what Galatians says, the fruit of the Spirit, right? It's love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control.
Yeah.
One of the things we forget is that these are not separate attributes. Like if we're when I did my study on it, these are the attributes of Jesus, right? So this means that what you have is not just love and joy. You have a loving joy. You have a joyful love, but you also have a joy, then a celebratory emotion that is self-controlled. Because they're going to be a self-controlled, joyful love. Like all these things start melding together into what is this fruit of the Spirit. And so I would advise, that if you're one of those people who's concerned about losing control, you're probably not going to. If you're not,
yeah, that's probably true.
if you're not somebody who's like, I never lose control, you might be like, maybe you should kind of check. Like, hey, have I not allowed the virtue of that self-control into this joy and everything else? Like, because somehow I thought that this isn't supposed to have bound limits. Like there's a thing in that I've seen where, like we say, these extremes occur because we won't allow ourselves to have a kind of a nuanced, almost robust, I like to think of a gem like it has facets on it, and each of these things are like a facet. They all make up the gem. You can't remove one without all of them disappearing, in a sense. And so there's a beauty to it that when you really have a true joy that's truly self-controlled, that, when you're raising your hands, I raise my hands knowing full well that what I'm doing is oftentimes either A, I'm surrendering, right?
Which is important.
Or B, some people want to do like, hey, daddy, pick me up. I'm not, that's not the emotion I get into. That's not the one I feel typically.
It's not the one for you.
But I do, as you can see, talk with my hands. And so I just go, if I'm a naturally talkative person with my hands, why would I not sing with my hands? And so I do a lot of things like, there's that song Revival at the Chain, I hear the chains fall. I just visually see chains falling off and falling to the floor, and you hear that clank sound. It's just like, that's going through my head while I'm singing that. And it just emphasizes in my imagination and my energy of what that revival would look like. And then I'm just like, pour it out. Like I'm asking for it. Then I'll just like, pour it out on me, pour it out on everything. Like I like interaction, because otherwise my mind won't engage appropriately the lyrics. And that's really where I encourage people to go. This is a holistic thing, not just a music thing.
Yeah, you're not just reciting words.
Right.
You are prayerfully and worshipfully expressing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? What's your favorite worship psalm? I know everybody at the church knows what it is.
Yeah, it's Agnus Dei. And you know what? That song doesn't say love in it either. It's a beautiful, and really, going back to what Greg said earlier, I think one of the reasons that song is, and I mean, it's kind of been a joke that, but I think one of the reasons that song is so meaningful to me is I had a very emotional experience in that song, where I remember I was home and the song was blaring and I was worshiping and I just melted and just started crying and I don't really even remember what I was going through or where that all came from. It was just a very emotionally powerful moment for me, and so every time I hear that song, I don't get that way again, but I resonate with that wow, this was a powerful moment, kind of like when you're looking at pictures of your kids growing up, and it takes you back to that moment, You don't necessarily relive that moment, but you touch, you're touched by that experience and reflection.
Yeah, and I think that when I'm thinking about old songs, I always think sometimes they hit me like they'll bring me back to youth group, or they'll bring me back to, when I mean youth group, I mean when I was the youth pastor in that youth group. Or there'll be times I go back and it's like, whoa, I feel like I'm a kid again at the, or I'm at kids camp, hallelujah, whatever the. But I just want to also express one final thought is that I know not everybody's the same, right? So people's levels of expression are going to be different.
But you should have some.
Right. Not everybody's going to be like, oh, I'm an actor and I'm expressing, but there are certain moves, certain body postures that are throughout the scriptures that I think are just sacred to actually
do.
Yeah. That if you practice them, they shape the way that you worship and pray. Like, I know we fold our hands and close our eyes. It's very Germanic. It actually came from Germany. The idea that you need to shut the world out and push away everything so you could focus or something. I mean, I'm ADD, and it's like eyes open, eyes closed. I'm distracted. There's just nice. It's not. But I have found that if I keep my eyes open, and there are times where I will lift my hands, like it says Jesus did, or in the New Testament, people would pray, hands lifted, eyes to the sky. Man, that's a very different experience. So just thinking about these things are not typically just expressive. Sometimes we're doing obedience when we need to obey. We especially in worship.
We talked. Go ahead. We talked about this in drama class, where oftentimes we're unaware, even myself, of the postures that we hold in our body and what that communicates to other people. And so we were going through characters and how they communicate to the rest of the people in the audience. And this response, doing this, is called a barrier.
And for those of you listening, he's crossing his arms in front of him.
If I fold my hands and I put them in front of me, that's giving a barrier between you, and it makes you feel colder from the audience. If you open your hands, it makes people feel like they're coming closer to you. These are just universal body language tips that they teach you. And the same is true with your own emotions. If you want to get into the character, you act as if the character. So if I want to be stoic, I fold my hands, and now I'm kind of almost in that posture. Then your feelings start to follow. And I think the same thing is true in worship. The Bible says, that you have a Lord and you have a Savior and you have a God. And I like having a God. I like having a Savior and a Lord, but that does mean He's in control. And I have to show that physically somehow. I can't just say it. It can't just be a metaphor. And one of those is to submit. And in the Bible, submission wasn't, the words themselves don't mean in your head. They mean with your body. And so prayer is with your body.
I'm just imagining, the book of Philippians says, every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father, right? And I'm just imagining that one guy standing there going, and the angel's like, you need to kneel. He's like, I'm kneeling in my heart. It's like, I don't know if that guy would last very long in front of the angel. So it's just kind of,
and your body posture will change your perspective. I mean, you think about just being in worship and being on your knees and just groaning before the Lord. And I will tell you, at 62 years old, if you're on your knees and you're trying to get up,
thank you, God.
You are groaning before the Lord. And a lot of that has to do with your body posture.
I would say,
Wow. I'm just so bad sometimes.
I would say test this. This would be something I think you could test. If you're kind of stoic and you're just not feeling emotions and you just feel kind of, and maybe even just no emotions, you feel numb, the next time you come to church, raise your hands physically and listen and sing the songs and pay attention and see if it doesn't change as you go through the song. Because I do feel like I've had those experiences. I feel nothing. I'm just going to raise my hands. And then, oh my gosh, everything changes in a moment. And so I would say test this. And if it doesn't work out, I'd love to talk to you, because to me, I find it does work.
And this is not fake it till you make it.
It's not fake it. It's
That's
just
not
submission to the Lord.
Yeah.
It's like it's the person I love's birthday. You don't always feel like writing good feelings, but you know they're there. And so you have to tap into them. And so you do that by writing it out and thinking it through and then doing it. And I think it's the same for worship. Sometimes I have to prepare my mind. I have to go, okay, it's been busy. I rolled into church. The traffic was bad. This guy cut me off. I got to put all that aside for a minute. I'm in the church, take a breath and engage with the people and then engage in worship. So.
All right. And we have a couple of questions, right? So you may have better wording for it, but we did have a question about women submitting to their husbands, right?
Let's see if I have the question.
Boom, 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 boom. But the answer to that is yes. Yes. Nancy, if you're listening.
Oh.
Yeah, I got the question here.
Oh my gosh.
The question I have is, sorry, Nancy. What does it mean to submit to your husband in the Bible? And what if he makes a bad decision? Which is probably the worry of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. How do I submit to a bad leader?
Yeah, I will say, though, the Bible is not, you submit to the Lord first and foremost, right? So obviously if your husband is telling you to do something that is not biblical, you submit first to the Lord. And I think also this is kind of ideally, right? The husband should be, a proper representative of Christ in the family, and he is responsible for his household before the Lord. And so hopefully he is not making horrible decisions. I will say I did premarital counseling with a couple years and years ago, and he came from that perspective. A very reformed perspective was just the woman submits to the husband, whatever I say goes. And it doesn't matter if it's a good decision or not. She has to. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If you had a gambling addiction and you wanted to sell the house and put it all on 17 Red in Vegas, she should submit to that decision. Yes. And I'm just like, that is not what that means, And so I'm just like, through this course. And I mean, I think it was the first time in a counseling session that I actually got into an argument, like raised voice argument with somebody, and just like, you are wrong, and so at the end of it going through, I was telling them, you guys should hold off, and not get married right now. You guys need some counseling. And
I thought that's what we were going through.
Yeah.
And then
you need more.
Yeah, you guys need a lot more counseling before you get married. And they said, no, we're getting married, and they were divorced in less than a year. But submitting to your husband does not mean you do whatever he says whenever he says it, and he has and in a sense that he has no regard for you either.
Yeah, it's really important.
Nancy, I hope you weren't listening to that.
No, I think that you're right. Like I wouldn't change anything that you were saying. I can just read the text, because it's important to have the whole text.
Yeah, where are you at?
It's in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, and understanding that he's already kind of set up this entire conversation as an idea of us, how, being imitators of God and walking in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. So that's important, because he's going to repeat this. And so he's going to go through all this conversation about us loving the Lord and what it means that we're alive and walking with him and all these things. And then he's going to say, giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So, and then that word submit is going to be picked up in verse 22. It's not even in the Greek. It's in the earlier 21 of the Greek. And so it's pulled into 22. And so one of the examples of us submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ is, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. And the idea of as to the Lord there is Lord first, husband second, right? So it's like, you're going to submit to Jesus out of reverence to Jesus, you submit to your husband. And so I'll pick up the other side. So I don't disagree. Like the husband says, go do this evil thing. You don't listen. Like you submit as unto the Lord first. And the Lord would never ask you to do something like that. The second one is to realize that the command to the husbands is love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's where this guy was just off.
And I did go there with him.
And I'm like, what do you think this means? It means that you are willing to put her needs, her desires, and her wants before your own, to the point that you would die protecting and sanctifying and caring for her, to provide for her all that like Christ provides for the church. And so we realize that pretty much you would never make a decision that was selfish for yourself. You would always try to make the decision that's best for her as a responsible agent, as the leader. And yeah, you have the responsibility of leadership. You have you're going to be judged for your family. The husband is responsible in that sense. Wives, however, what I don't think they realize is the empowerment that happens when they're willing to submit to the decisions of their husbands. There's a lot of growing up men do when suddenly they have to make a decision that a whole bunch of dependents are going to rise or fall on. We have to remember, I think women naturally have this ability because when they get pregnant, their very life is dependent on their body. And so there is a natural reality that the baby is dependent upon me for food. The baby is dependent on me for existence, for getting into this world. That is a natural reality for women. And
women often, and I'm not just talking about Christian, but women often make sacrifices for their baby.
Mm-hmm.
I quit smoking. You don't drink during your pregnancies. You make sure you're taking care of your body. And so it's like, I'm going to do things that, or stop doing things that I want to do in order for the health of the baby. And I
think what God is saying is that where women have a natural responsibility that is clearly designed in their bodies, men are called to this responsibility because it grows them up. It actually calls them away from being little boys who have to ask their wives for permission and stuff like that to, oh no, I need to make decisions, and I need to make them wisely in love of my family and in love of my wife so that she is cared for, because my decisions create havoc and I have dependence. And so when you start making decisions only for yourself out of your own selfish desires and needs, you are no longer loving your wife as Christ loved the church, and you are no longer leading her in a manner that she should submit to, because that's not as unto the Lord. Now, if you submit and he leads you into a horrible place, yeah, it's on him. He's gonna, but the bottom line is that this is not what a husband is supposed to do.
And guys, again, you're getting the support of your wife and that submission, and it carries that responsibility of, I want to make better decisions, and like Greg was saying, makes you grow up. One of the quick little tests that you can do for yourself right now to see if you're in that more mature standpoint is this. When your wife asks you where you want to eat, and all of a sudden it strikes fear in your heart because you want to choose the place that she wants to go, then you've moved to that mature place rather than just picking where you want to go and telling her to suck it up and eat it, right? No, so there is that difficulty of that decision that weighs on a man so greatly. So number one, women, support your husbands.
Are you choosing number one on the menu?
Yeah. Support your husbands by just agreeing anywhere he says. But two, guys, one of the things you can do too, instead of saying where you want to go, you know what? I was planning on surprising you. Where do you think I'm taking you? Boom. Her first answer is where you're going for dinner. So
you're like, wow, what a shock.
This is just brutal marriage advice, people.
Yeah, brutal marriage manipulation.
I'm here to just evade all problems.
And we wonder why those guys got divorced within a... Just kidding. No, it's an important question. I think a lot of people, I hear so much about wives submitting to your husbands, and there's my wife loves to listen to various like feminist thinkers and who are Christians, and some aren't, but she just kind of like
wants to know how they think.
Yeah, and she dives into it. One of the things that she loves about some of these women who are very, very biblical, very strong, very theological, and yet they're very conservative. Like they would never want to be the senior pastor, an elder, but they're just intelligent women. They go, our favorite thing to do is ask a young liberal lady, like, okay, it says wives submit to your husbands. Would you be mad if it said wives love your husbands like Christ loved the church? And they're like, yeah. Because it's obvious that what Paul's calling us to is a mutual love and connection. And what we really want is this selfish independence. Now, I don't think that, and I'm going to be careful here, because what I don't want to imply is that if you're a single person, that somehow you're a selfish person, you can't learn this. That's not the case at all. Notice that's why he started with, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. There are lots of people that we as human beings, whether single or married, have to submit to. We have to submit to authorities. We have to submit to Jesus. We have to submit to leadership of church. We have to submit to parents. There's lots of ways we learn this lesson. And so it's, but what he's doing here is primarily fighting and destroying that curse, the Edenic curse, where your desire will be for him and his desire will be to rule over you. That's the problem that was introduced because of sin into the marriage. And the antidote is, wives, come under your husbands and follow his lead. Husbands, lead as if you're taking your wife to the place she wants to go. Like care for her in the best direction. When you take those two things into consideration, the man feels empowered and the woman feels loved and cared for, and the marriage goes in the same direction.
All right. Question number 2.
Do you have more questions?
Yes.
Well, I'll try to keep them close to each one. This one is just a common question. It's just about singleness, since we talked about marriage. Does the Bible ever use the word single? It says unmarried. I know, but why? Why does it? What is the terms the Bible uses for what we call single? Is that a thing?
I would think that. Well, I don't know. You guys are more about the culture things than I am, but just from an ignorant standpoint, not really, delving into it or really. My thought would be, in that time there were basically two positions. You were married or unmarried, right? And usually if you were unmarried, especially if you were a woman, you were taken care of by your family or whatever. So, nowadays, singleness is a whole different thing. People living in their own houses and, having a whole life to themselves, apart from dwelling with their families and their communities. So I do think that we have looked at singleness differently than cultures. And so really at that point, you were either in a familial environment by being married, or you were in a familial environment by being unmarried. And I don't know, that would be my take on it.
I mean, you can find the word single in the ESV.
In the ESV?
They put it in there in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 8. To the unmarried and the widows, I say, it is good for them to remain single as I am. In a more literal translation, it's to the unmarried and widows, I say that it is best for them to remain as I am. They don't have the word single in there.
So that's a new addition to kind of make it relevant to what the passage is talking about.
Yeah.
In the ESV.
Yeah. So the thing is that, like, singleness, as we would understand it, is a different thing today, like Brent was saying, than it was in the first century. And jump in here, because you've studied this a lot. So,
plus, singles bar had a more attractive name than just an unmarried bar.
Unmarried bars?
Yeah. I don't know where that even came from.
Or married bars.
I've been dealing with a really bad cold. I'm on cough medicine. I don't know what I'm saying, people.
Yeah. Anyway, but so David, like, when Jesus and John the Baptist show up on the scene and they're not married, that is a very kind of radical expression in the Jewish world, because the Jewish world, it was an expectation you got married. They arranged marriages, so you didn't have dating scenes, you didn't have all this stuff that was going on. They would contract you with someone if you were going to be somebody who didn't get married. You usually were found living in the home of your brother or your parents, your brother or something who could help provide for you. Because the last thing they wanted you as a single woman or a single man to do, a single men would typically go out and just do their life. Single women, if they had no protection, would wind up in prostitution, or they would wind up in some other
slave
labor
environment. Yeah, slave
and
labor.
So the issue for the church was to care for widows, and widows is a kind of catch-all phrase for people who are unmarried in that sense, or agam. There is a term, agamos, which is unmarried, but the idea behind being unmarried in Paul's mentality and Jesus's mentality, when he's talking about the eunuchs and all this stuff, is that this is a condition that in their day would have been chosen, because you would have to say, no, Mom, I don't want to get married. No, you don't need to go out and get the matchmaker to make me a match and all that stuff. And so you chose it for the sake that you were showing what the kingdom of God looks like. You were already living out that full expression of the kingdom of God as I am living like we will be for eternity. We will all be single in that sense far longer than any of us were ever married, because we will be, in the eternal sense, we'll be brothers and sisters in Christ. There won't be marriage or giving a marriage. And so we have almost a higher, in their mindset, that would be a higher love. The brother-sister love was actually far more considered affectionate and real. In fact, you would actually leave your family members on holidays to go back with your home to be with your brothers and your sisters. And that was like the way you did holidays in the ancient world. So when we're talking about a single person, the way one guy I just heard him say was somebody who's single-minded for the kingdom. And so this is why missionaries and a lot of the priests and the nuns are in the modern Catholic Church are single, because they view it as like you are expressing and showing off this holy dedication to your life married to the kingdom. And so that's kind of how singleness is dealt with in the Bible. And it's actually honorable. It's a more honorable position, just like that the New Testament gives, in a way that today I don't think any single person ever say like, yeah, I feel honored being single. That's like,
yeah, no, it's different nowadays. I mean, I think the church struggles with what to do with singles, just in my experience. Just been to different churches, and it typically seems that, most of your churches, they'll focus on a lot of marriage, because a lot of the whole institutions of church and community are based on the primary relationship. And so most of your resources, children's programs and everything, are for families. And singles are kind of like, well, how do you deal with that? And even people I've seen run singles ministry have themselves never been quote unquote single for very long. If you got married at 22, you really don't know what single is like at 35. And so, but your memories are going back to the time when you were young and made decisions that a 20-year-old would make. You wouldn't be in that same condition. So I think there's a struggle to know, what do I do with this population? And it's grown and grown and grown. And most people just want them to get married again. That way the resources apply, and that seems to be the thing. But I think the idea that being single already mimics your ability to sacrifice as Jesus did for the church is not, it used to be looked at as a virtue. And so the idea was, I'm already acting that out. If a husband is to give to his wife like Christ did to the church, if you just give to the church, that's the glorification that you should receive from that. You're forsaking what everyone else would do in order to just focus on the church. But that would mean, as a single, you would have to plug into a church. And so on your own, it's going to be more difficult to do that. And I think the singles I've met who do it well become a vital part of the church, but it is an uphill battle because everything's kind of focused on that relationship.
Yeah, the danger, I think, in our current environment is that a lot of the stuff they're trying to make singles overcome their loneliness and things by not calling us to a greater commitment to Christ, or a greater commitment to the relationship with with the church. Rather, they're saying, go live that autonomous, individuated life. And I think even worse now is the fact that the more we've pushed that, the more a single is becoming just an atom, just a floating random, a disconnected person. And it creates loneliness, it creates disease, mental disease, it creates all kinds of problems because we're built for community. We're built for family. We are built for relationship. And so I like the ideas of the past when we had like monasteries and we had like these communal places, because our modern setup is not good for, first of all, not only do you have I would say there are singles and there's single units. Yeah. Like a marriage now becomes a single unit. And all the pressure of society and life falls on that single unit, and it crushes marriages, just as all that pressure is sitting on a single person, and it crushes the single person. And so now we're crushing and breaking marriages into single units that are now being crushed even further because of all the response. So our system is really set up to neither foster a robust community that both marriage and unmarrieds need together, that we need one another. We need lots of each other, more than we ever imagined. And that's why we got to be with church. That's why we got to be together at church. We've got to be ministering together. We've got to have as many ties as we possibly can, because we'll be healthier for it.
And also, just as human beings, it is a good note to try to listen to people whose experiences are different than your own. I know some people have a hard time imagining, because it does come up a lot, like, oh, I was selfish until I got married. Well, that's a choice. Mm-hmm. There's ways not to become selfish as a single person. And so the idea that you can't achieve that, or God couldn't achieve that, I think has little imagination on God's side. And I think that the idea is to not be selfish, whether you're married or not. And
right.
The idea is to pursue godliness, married or not, and not to idolize it as the only means to get righteous before the Lord, or to become a Christian. It's almost like we've idolized marriage so much that some singles think if they're not married, then they almost can't grow, that they're still children and they still feel infantile in some ways. And some people respond that way. They live in their house longer. They kind of live off their parents because they haven't launched or whatever. And there's not a model for, here's what it looks like to be a successful, God-believing single person for however long you do it. And the idea is you're not, why wait? Because that's a big problem, is people's like, oh, you just wait to get married. What if God never calls you to get married? Just pursue holiness now, and no matter what happens, God will be pleased and your life will go good.
Yeah, there's that myth that if there's a man who struggles with like pornography, or there's a woman who struggles with loneliness or whatever, and you think, oh, marriage is going to solve these things.
Oh, geez.
It won't. You'll be lonely and married. You can be lonely married. You can be you won't stop with your selfish desires. If you haven't learned virtue on your own, marriage isn't going to change that. In fact, the only way you grow up in a marriage is not because you suddenly, if you grow up in a marriage because your wife or your husband has to help you, make you grow up, you're just in a parental relationship with your spouse. That is not healthy. You're not actually in a marriage. In fact, the only way to truly develop in a marriage is when you take responsibility for your own self-development, which you should do when you're single or married. There's no change. There's no difference.
And I agree with you, Stephen, when you were saying that it's important to hear people, to listen to people with different points of view, different opinions than you do, because for one, it confirms to me oftentimes just how right I am, when I do listen to people with different opinions.
Nancy
and
tells
views.
me that a lot.
Yeah. All right. So we have another question that was talking about, are playing video games bad?
Well, this is probably more, I don't know. How often do you guys play video games?
I never play video games.
I used to play them more, but I don't play them as much as I used to.
I used to play video games a lot, and then college happened, and I had to choose whether I wanted to graduate or not. But I know for a lot of my young kids and friends, and it is a big part of their daily life, and I do enjoy video games. But there was a point at which I had to ask myself, is this interfering with my own ability to grow? And I do think there are a lot of people that play video games so long that they don't develop other skills. And so I don't want to be one of those people that bandwagons on and hates video games, because I do enjoy them. But I do realize that if I had not put it aside at some point, or at least fasted it at certain points, that it would lead to me not growing in certain skills just as an adult. Like, and the reason why is because video games are, to me, do teach skills, and you do resource allocation. You learn how to do numbers. The problem is you're not making money or growing in a skill or using it as a labor, and so it's not a work or a service.
It's really like a fast forward version. It's kind of a false. You're getting a false sense of success and progress. I'm watching my boys. They love video games, and they've been playing one. And the crazy thing is, right? They'll call their friends, and they're like teaming up on a phone, playing and fighting and doing this stuff together, building something together. Like, actually, that's the part I'm like, that to me was 10 times better than the video games I played growing up.
Right, because it's just you in the game.
Me in the game, or me and somebody else sitting watching me play the game until I died, and then they got to go.
Those are Nintendo days.
Right, and that was fine. But there's something about video games for me, it hits a threshold, and I'm just bored with them. It's like, everything's the same. I don't, but it hits the same thing. Like, I want to be productive. So my family, we literally just hit a screen fast. We do screen fast every once in a while.
It's really healthy.
And we shut them down, and like, we've kept our boys from it. And it's so funny. It takes about one day. One day they're a little grouchy and frustrated. And then within an hour of like the next morning, they were all like, I went to the park and I would jump this and check this out on my camera and look. And my other boys are building a board game. Like, they're doing this thing. It's like all this creativity just goes boom and starts exploding because something else isn't sucking up their bandwidth. And I don't know what it is, but like video games for young men, especially, it really does.
It hits us good. It hits that spot about you. It's like a providing, and it kind of does resource allocation. It does these things. It gives you where you feel like you're building skills. You're learning how to overcome obstacles and stuff in a game. It does. They even do studies on this, that how they're trying to make the games like register with your achievement status. So there's all these little prizes that pop up when you win a video game or whatever.
Right.
And they do that from psychology research, and reward and achievement in a video game can literally take the place of doing it in real life. And so you end up like all of the rewards you get are digital and unreal, and you can't cash them in anywhere but that
you'll
world.
Spend real money actually to get stuff.
And I think I did not grow up playing video games because my parents didn't, we didn't have a lot of money growing up.
With the rocks and the stones.
So they never bought,
You just played with rocks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Were there video games out when you were?
They were a little bit, I mean, they were gaining popularity when I was growing up. My neighbor always had the latest video game. So it's like one of those things where, I'm going to go to his house and play. But I didn't get to go that often or play that often. So I didn't grow up playing video games. And then when we got married and, then I got a video game, and I just never could get totally into it, right? Part of it would be you'd play for an hour and a half and then you would die, and then you would have to start back over and get to play for another hour and a half just to get to where you were and die again. And so that just always frustrated me.
Well, they changed that a little bit.
They did. Now you can save and do all that kind of stuff. But I do think that the things that you grew up with are things that you are connected with, right? So like people today, it's like, are video games healthy, or do people spend too much time with video games? And I would say, yeah, they do, but for like my generation too, we grew up with TV, so, is TV bad? Can you spend too much time watching TV? Yeah, and I mean, I think part of that, is it good or bad? What?
The joke in the Jane Austen stuff is like, people would tell you, you're reading too many novels, they'll rot your brain.
And then, what? I was going to bring that up. I was going to bring that up where, like, when you were talking about fast screens, video games. I don't know if that means TV and all electronics, or if it's like video games.
Any individual. Only times we will turn the screen on is when we all watch something together.
So again, kind of playing devil's advocate here, right? You love to read, right? And that's individual, so people, like you were just saying with Jane Austen, I was going to bring that up, not Jane Austen, but the idea that some people love to read and they can spend hours a day reading and they're isolated and, and so, anything you do that you spend too much time doing it is unhealthy, but people will defend the things they like, and I'm not saying this is you, but you love to read. So it's like, well, no, we don't have to fast reading because, this is the stuff that's bad. Reading is good for you. But anything is not good for you if it takes up, number one, too much of your time.
Are you saying you should fast
If you
reading
start
the Bible?
saying no, if you start saying no to the important things, like if you're missing family events because you would rather be playing a video game or you would rather stay home and watch your TV show, so when you're starting to say no to important communal family events for the sake of these things, then you are in a very unhealthy place,
I was going to read the text, because I think I agree with you. I think it does apply to like novels and things like that, or
because I would
self-help
say
books.
even in books,
You should never fast the scripture. I was just going to say that right now. You don't go on reading fasts of the Bible. I mean, you're like, I don't like reading. You should read your Bible. But it says all things are lawful for me. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12. But not all things are helpful. This is like they had this, all things are lawful for me. It's kind of like their or a slogan, right?
You do whatever we want.
All things are lawful for me. And he says, but I will not be dominated by anything. And that's the goal here, is this word dominated is the idea of not having anything be my master or anything having authority over me. And that's the question. If you can't put it down, who's in charge? You or that object? If I can't put the novel down, if I can't turn the game off because I know I got to go to church, or I got to go spend time with my family and go have dinner, or if I can't turn the movie off, or I can't put you name it, a video game, my website, my Instagram, you name it, if you can't put it down to go do what you need to do, then the question really needs to be, should you fast it for a time? And I think the answer is you should probably plan in some fasts for that.
And the more discomfort you have with the thought of
doing
fasting that or putting that down or stopping, the more you need to, right?
Yeah.
If somebody says you play video games far too much, and you kind of know that you do, and the more pushback you want to give them, the more you want to defend it, the more you do have a problem with it, and you need to work on that. And
we all have it. I think that's the critical thing to realize, is that everybody has it. So
this is true of social media. This is also true to me with a lot of people limit their communication to their friends online. And I would say even in that, your friends should decide to meet together physically. Because now I've noticed people have never met their friends. They've seen them, but they've never met them. And we're living in that generation where people are going to have whole friend groups that they've never met before. And I think that does
that
do
they
something.
don't live near.
I think really seeing someone's face, interacting with their body chemistry and their language, and just being around and seeing how they act offline is an important thing to develop as a young person. And I've seen people not be able to do job interviews or have certain things where they have to be pressured to talk in front of a crowd. And all of that is because you've spent so much time in a controlled environment, and you can turn it off and turn it on whoever you want at any point.
And when you go with your friends, don't bring your phone. Stuff on, shut it, just have it available for what you need. Don't pull it out while you're talking to people. My problem is I got so into not looking at my phone now. I put it upstairs, and people are trying to get a hold of me and talk to me. I'm just like,
I know.
Sorry, guys. I was just talking to my family and just forgot about that thing called the phone. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, though. It's really not dominating you anymore if you can just turn it off because you need to turn it off. And it doesn't matter what the consequences are. That's really critical. So I think it's a great question. I think it's one that is easily expandable upon a lot of things. So.
And I would venture to say it's not just, don't just measure it up against video games. Measure it up against everything in your life. Is something so, are you out of control in any area of your life that you need to regain control over? And, not all things are bad, but all things can be bad.
One of the questions I got too is from my nephew, two of my nephews. One of the older nephew. I'll go with the older question, then we'll go with the younger question because that's a good one. When did Jesus retain his memories from the Old Testament Christophanies? Now, this is a real nerdy question, so would be my older nephew. And so this is a question I hadn't really thought about. I don't know if you thought about this, Greg or Brent. When did Christ know about himself from the Old Testament when he's walking around in a theophany or Christophany? So when did he have got those memories? What age?
I had never even thought about that.
I've never thought about it.
And you're just talking about Jesus in his human form, walking the earth.
Walking the earth. When did he go that was me. I was there, in Exodus, and I was there. And
And if he could remember that. Like,
When did he become aware of those memories, that those are the Old Testament memories?
and aware that it was him.
So for those of you who don't know, a Christophany is often the phrase people use when they believe that the pre-incarnate, before he came in the form of the baby, Jesus, walked in the Old Testament and talked to people, and we call that a Christophany, and there are a few of those in your Old Testament.
So when Jesus was walking the earth at age 32, did he remember the time that he did this thing in the Old Testament?
So here's interesting. So here we go.
That is very
you have
theoretical.
You have some very interesting
nerdy college question.
You have some very interesting kind of verses here. I'll give you one of them. So we'll start back here. Jesus is having an argument with the Pharisees about kind of where he comes from and all this stuff. And so the Jews said to him, "We now know that you have a demon. Abraham died as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he'll never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be?" So this is John chapter 8, and now at verse 54. Jesus answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It's my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You're not yet 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham?" And Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." And so they picked up stones to throw at him. Does Jesus remember Abraham? I have a tendency to think he did. That there is some, and here's how I've thought about this. Because I thought a lot about the incarnation and Trinity and stuff like that over the years. Especially since incarnation, one of the things you have to understand is this thing called the Chalcedonian box. Big word, okay?
Okay.
The Chalcedonian box is a way of thinking about a council that happened at Chalcedon, or Chalcedon, however you want to say it. But Chalcedon there was a big raging debate over the incarnation. How was they had Trinity's done, right? Nicaea's happened. We've got all the wars and kicked guys back out and bringing them back in, and all this stuff's happened. So if you don't know what the Nicene Council is, you can look that up. But or we'll cover it another time.
Yeah.
Get a good Christian history book. But the Council of Chalcedon was the one where they resolved that Jesus is 100% man and 100% God. And his nature is separated and not mixed. And so that's kind of the box. There's this kind of 4 things you have to agree to be orthodox in that sense.
Because in the council, they were struggling with the nature of who God is when he was incarnate.
Right. So they were struggling with whether, so like there's some heresies out there, like Jesus has, in there, like some people will go like, well, Jesus is man in his soul, but his spirit is the Holy Spirit, and that's how he's God. And so he's not, and that would be breaking the Chalcedonian box. And there's some different groups out there that would try to explain it that way, and it doesn't work.
Get into some culty stuff.
Yeah, and then so some people have divided Jesus up to where his spirit went to heaven with the Father, his soul went down into Sheol, and his body went in the grave. Like they split him into 3. And
oh, wow.
He's conscious, and that's considered heresy because of Chalcedon. So all that to be said, when you get into this kind of idea, I like to think of, this is why I landed on the image of God, being that we as human beings have all the attributes of God in a limited form, meaning that we're like, we can express every attribute that God has, but not fully, obviously. He's infinite, we're finite. And the reason I did that is because Jesus has to be able to express fully as a human can the attributes of God. And so because otherwise he can't be God showing off who God is. And so he expresses these things perfectly. So how can he have this, he is a person, the second person of the Trinity, the Son, in a limited body. So he has all knowledge, but then he will say things like, I don't know the day nor the hour of my return. Only the Father knows that. And you're like, what? Like, how does that work? Like, what's going on here? And these are verses that are routinely struggled over. But I kind of put it like, in a sense, like I think of computers have helped a little bit with this in my mind, because you can imagine that I have this connected out there on a giant cloud, right? The cloud's got all this information, and I have access to all of it if I want it, but my computer can only pull up so much on its RAM, and I have to file through that. And I think of the brain, the human brain, as that working with Jesus. He's God and he's fully man. So he's got this human spirit, this human soul, this human person that he is with a human brain, and yet he has access to the infinite knowledge of the universe. And so if he wanted to pull up the memory, he pulls it up. He can pull it up. It's available from his eternity, and he brings it in. And so then he can know. So
okay, this leads me off a rabbit trail,
rabbit trail.
Coincidentally. All right, so Jesus in his human state, right?
Right.
Okay, so he can only, like you were talking about the RAM, he can only contain so much. So one of the things, in the Old Testament, God said, no one has seen my face, and basically you would die if you saw my face. And we usually equate that with sin, right? To some degree that, we're sinful beings. If we saw God, fully in, we would just die.
Okay.
So Jesus being sinless, could he have seen the full face of God and not died?
John 1:18.
You see
or
me?
John 1:18 says, no one has ever seen God,
me.
the only God who is at the Father's side has made him known. And this is talking about Jesus, that Jesus saw God, basically saw his face. He beheld his glory.
Right, but did he do that in his
humanity?
in his carnal state?
In his body.
In his human
Yeah.
before he was resurrected? Like there's no, except that the transfiguration would be the only time we would assume that he had, been in the presence of heaven in that sense. But then he's expressing the power of what he is going to be in the glory of the kingdom. And in his resurrection, he becomes fully that. So he's fully seen the Father's face in the resurrection easily. There's no point that we would see that in the text where he'd ever seen the Father face to face, like
Right.
we would see that. But he would know and hear from the Lord. He would know the will of the Lord. He would understand it. He had a clear communication with him because he has the access to the knowledge of the Father, and so he didn't access the knowledge of the Father when his eternal knowledge. The Trinitarian knowledge is full. Everybody has the same exact knowledge, but each person expresses that knowledge differently. So this is really complicated Trinitarian conversations that really honestly gets even a little bit further off the deep end that I've gone, because it gets really philosophical about everything from object-subject distinctions to how all this stuff works out. It's pretty complicated.
I'm just wondering, in that 33 years that he was on the earth, if he would have saw God.
I think it would have been fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's why is it an
glowed.
interesting question? I think because I think it's hard sometimes for us to grasp how can God be fully human and fully God, and so it's a good question to ask. But I do think that we at least know the answer when he was an adult from that passage.
Mm-hmm.
He's recollecting the memory of knowing one of the patriarchs. And then the other question would be to me is I don't remember the passage when he was young and he found out that he was the Son of God. Would he have known then what he knew? Because that figure, that name, the Son of Man, Son of God, once he starts recognizing that, then he's going to know he's that Old Testament Christophany. And so it's probably, we know by the time he starts his ministry, he knows it. We don't know exactly when it must have started. But if I had to guess, I would say it's that bar mitzvah period where you're 13 and you're kind of like, he's in the temple and he's talking and he's starting to know what his role is.
I kind of wonder if Mary hadn't shared with him so that he kind of knew who he was. When he came to the full awareness of that would be the time at which, Jesus would have been the most mature you could be at the age that
you are,
without being like falling into the like Asperger's or, these kind of out of ranges that our brains can't handle. I think that he would have been the fullest of a human that you can express. That doesn't mean that he was the best soccer player that ever played soccer. It doesn't mean that he was
someone doesn't trip him.
Yeah, it does. It means that but if he had applied himself in that direction, he would have excelled at it effectively because he was disciplined and he would have been able to apply his knowledge. Now, yeah, so
on that deep question, my nephew has a similar question, the youngest nephew, and he wanted to know let's see, where was Jesus before he was born? Was he in heaven? And that's his question. So he wants to know, where was Jesus before he was born? Because we just had Christmas. I'm sure it's still on his mind. And that's Elijah and Lily's question. So
Yeah, so
it falls in the same kind of category.
Yeah, it does.
Enough.
And it's kind of hard to explain.
As long as he's not taking the Mormon position.
Well, he was
that.
talking about the Nicene Council. No, it's kidding.
Well, no, this is a harder.
good
This is a
question
harder
for
one to
babies.
explain to for little ones, because
How do you tell a little one this?
that
Yeah.
he's not Jesus until he's born. So
Uh-huh.
he is the Son of God. So he would be the second person of the Trinity, Yahweh. So you can see him as the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. So when you see Joshua and he
Captain
comes
of
up,
the Lord of Hosts.
captain of the Lord of Hosts, that's Jesus, but it's not. He wouldn't go by the name Jesus yet. He wasn't human. He was a manifestation as he wanted to be.
How do you say that to a 7-year-old?
Yeah, he kind of he was when you play a video game, you show up and you can be a little person on the screen, right? So sometimes Jesus gave himself a little avatar person on the screen, and he walked around down on earth. And so that's the Son of God shows up as an angel, a messenger of the Lord, and does these things. And then he goes back and he loads a new one. He runs around. When he became Jesus, he entered into the game himself. He didn't just he is now fully always in the human state. He never leaves it. And so now this is really who he is. He's not a little in and out, little digital. Nope. He lives in that state fully and completely. That would be a way of attacking it. I don't know.
How about you?
Here's another rabbit trail question. Okay, when Jesus showed up in the Old Testament, did he look like he looked in the New Testament?
I have no idea.
I would say he looked like some kind of spirit human form, and I don't know what doesn't describe what he looks like, so.
I mean, usually it's molten and glowing and fiery and
yeah, closer
scary.
maybe. If you read Revelation, that's a closer, but he seemed to know him as Jesus, so he probably looked more like the earthly version in Revelation.
Probably, yeah. So the hard part is that he's not incarnate in those cases.
Yeah.
He's not like actually human. He's in like an appearance of a physical appearance of that. So that's a hard one to explain in the
To a
simplest
child.
of
I think it's
language.
great to
So
answer these questions to a child. So I was like,
it's good. They're good questions.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I think we have gone way over time, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Debbie asked for a short one.
Yeah.
No, she made it
I have
long.
a couple more questions for next week then.
Oh,
too.
cool.
Okay,
Awesome.
cool.
So, yeah, thank you guys for joining us. I know this was a bit of a kind of really rabbity rabbit trail, rabbity rap. And so we're glad you joined us for this 100th episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, leave us some comments. Let us know. Please subscribe and hit the bell. Do all that fun stuff. It's on YouTube. Give us the reviews if you're on iTunes or Spotify or any of that fun stuff. But if you've got questions, you've got comments, the best way to get a hold of us and let us know is using that email at rabbittrail@obcc.church. That rabbittrail@obcc.church. We are glad you joined with us, and we hope to see you guys next week.
And
God
again,
bless.
just quick reminder, subscribe to the YouTube. If you already are subscribed, log in on your spouse's YouTube, and subscribe there. We want to get those up, and also download the app. And if you've already downloaded the app, get on your spouse's phone, download that app there. Also, don't forget to send us some memories that you've had over the last 2 years of the Rabbit Trail, what you've liked, what you give us some feedback, and send those questions in. So. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. I feel like you just ADD'd me, so that was awesome.
Good. Did I repeat everything you just said?
Pretty much.
Good. Perfect. And
So
I do that.
Send in your questions.
Yeah.
No,
And I mean, I'm
thought I was
telling
supposed to
you,
repay.
you guys say all the time, somebody needs to hear something 7 times before it takes root.
That would be you, right?
Yeah. So there you go.
So what episode was this, guys?
This was 100. Boom, chakalaka.
Bye.